Thank you for joining me for Lesson 1 of Advanced TOEFL Verbs. Here we go. Let's take a brief look at our verbs for this lesson. Deliberate, accost, impair, foresee, and our challenging word for this lesson, obfuscate. Our first verb for this lesson is deliberate. This word might look familiar to you. You probably already know the word deliberate as an adjective where we have the emphasis on the second syllable, deliberate. But for this class on verbs, we're looking at the verb form of the word deliberate, where we put the emphasis on the final syllable of the word. Now let's look at an example of how we can use the verb deliberate. So we have the sentence, we need to carefully and thoroughly consider our choices before making a final decision. Now we can use our advanced vocabulary word to streamline the sentence. We need to deliberate our choices before making a final decision. In this example, we can see both the verb and the adjective form. We should deliberate our choices, and our final decision should be deliberate. Our second verb for this lesson is accost, which means to approach someone forcefully in the sense of scolding them or getting after them. His professor approached him forcefully about his failure to submit his paper on time. His professor accosted him about his failure to submit his paper on time. Our third verb for this lesson is impair, which means to make something more difficult. Now, you can impair something or something can impair you. We'll look at both examples. Lack of sleep can make it more difficult to pay attention. And now here's the sentence with the advanced verb. Lack of sleep can impair your ability to pay attention. And here we can use the same verb but in the opposite way. She impaired her ability to pay attention by not getting enough sleep. The fourth verb for this lesson is foresee, which means to see something in advance or to predict something, literally to see it before. The team was unable to predict the obvious difficulty in completing the project. Predict is a perfectly good word here, and if that's the word that you can remember when you're taking the TOEFL test, don't worry about it. Because of the time restraints, you want to just go ahead and go forward. However, there is an opportunity to use a more advanced verb in this sentence. And so here's the example with the advanced verb. The team didn't foresee the obvious difficulty in completing the project. Using the advanced verb here makes the sentence more elegant and more native. And finally, we have our challenging verb for this lesson, obfuscate. This is a very advanced verb, but it's also a very useful one, so that's why I have included it here. Let's take a look at some examples. The student used advanced vocabulary to hide the fact that he didn't really understand the subject matter. And here we have the same sentence with the advanced verb substituted. The student used advanced vocabulary to obfuscate his lack of understanding of the subject matter. Now let's review our verbs for this lesson. Deliberate, done carefully and thoroughly. Accost, approach forcefully. Impair, make something more difficult. Foresee, see in advance, predict something. And obfuscate, make unclear or confusing. I hope you found this lesson helpful. We'll see you the next time. Welcome back for Lesson 2 of Advanced TOEFL Verbs. Here we go. Our verbs for this lesson are propose, refurbish, fabricate, ascertain, and the verb incite, which is often confused with the noun insight. Our first verb is propose, which means to introduce something in the sense of suggesting something. I would suggest that we take a quick break and then return to studying for our exam. I propose that we take a quick break and then return to studying for our exam. Propose is also the verb that we use when you ask someone to marry you. So here we have, I proposed to my girlfriend. Our next verb is refurbish, which means to make something new or usable again. This can be used literally, like for an old table, or it can be used more figuratively, which we'll take a look at. We can make our company's reputation new again by introducing modern products. And now we can make the sentence much more streamlined by introducing the more advanced verb. We can refurbish our company's reputation by introducing modern products. The next verb is fabricate, which means to make something. And again, like refurbish, it can be used figuratively or literally. You can fabricate something real, like a machine. But again, for our purposes, we're going to look at the verb in a more figurative sense, to make something up. And this can also be a nicer way of saying something is false or that someone is lying. We'll take a look. He falsified the evidence. He fabricated the evidence. So we're saying that he made up the evidence. We're saying the evidence is false. He lied about the evidence. Our next verb is ascertain, to find the real cause of something, to figure it out. I could not figure out the basis for the speaker's arguments. I could not ascertain the basis for the speaker's arguments. The final verb for this lesson is incite, which means to begin something. Incite is a verb, but it's very similar sounding to the noun insight, which means to gain a better understanding of something. Controversial topics can start arguments. Controversial topics can incite arguments. And now here's an example with the noun insight. The new information gave me insight into the topic. Finally, let's do a quick review of the verbs for this lesson. Propose, introduce something. Refurbish, make new or usable again. Fabricate, make up. Ascertain, find the real cause of something. And incite, begin. I hope you found Lesson 2 helpful. Until the next time. Thank you for joining me for Lesson 3 of Advanced TOEFL Verbs. Let's get things going. Our verbs for this lesson are consolidate, bolster, incubate, proscribe, and two shades of meaning words, effect and affect. The first verb for this lesson is consolidate, bring things together. The writer should bring together her main points. The writer should consolidate her main points. The next verb is bolster, which means to strengthen. Better evidence would strengthen the points that the writer is making. Now, there's nothing wrong with the word strengthen. That's great. But strong, strength, strengthen, these are words that get used a lot. So let's look at a way where we can include a different word, a more advanced word, that's going to add some variety to your writing and speaking. Better evidence would bolster the writer's points. The third verb for this lesson is incubate, grow in a protected environment. School is the perfect place to grow your ideas. Again, grow is a perfectly good word, but it is a very basic vocabulary word, and for the TOEFL test, we want to take every opportunity we can to use a more advanced word. So let's take a look. School is a great place to incubate your ideas. Proscribe, forbid by law or policy. This is definitely a very advanced verb, but also a useful one. Plagiarism is absolutely forbidden by school policy. School policy proscribes plagiarism. Now we'll look at two shades of meaning words, effect and affect. Effect with an E receives influence. Affect with an A gives influence. Let's look at some examples. An effect of traveling can be a change of perspective on the world. Here we receive the effect of traveling. Traveling can affect your perspective on the world. In this case, traveling gives the effect. Finally, let's review our verbs for this lesson. Consolidate, bring things together. Bolster, strengthen. Incubate, grow in a protected environment. Proscribe, forbid by law or policy. And finally, effect and affect. Effect receives the influence, affect gives an influence on something. I hope you found Lesson 3 useful. We'll see you soon. As always, welcome back for Lesson 4 of Advanced TOEFL Verbs. For this lesson, we'll look at the verbs formulate, dupe, goad, assuage, and our confusing word, reprove. Our first verb for this lesson is formulate. Do something systematically. I systematically created my hypothesis based on the latest available research. We can use the word formulate to streamline that sentence. I formulated my hypothesis based on the latest available research. Our next verb is dupe, which means to trick or deceive someone. The dishonest salesman tricked him into buying a worthless car. The dishonest salesman duped him into buying a worthless car. Now, in our previous example, trick is a perfectly fine word. It expresses what happened, but it is a lower level vocabulary word. And by using the word dupe, we're able to get a little bit more of the emotion, a little bit more of the drama of what happened with this dishonest salesman. Goad, annoy someone into doing something. My friends kept annoying me until I agreed to go with them to the club. My friends goaded me into going to the club. So by using the verb goaded to express this really complex idea of someone annoying someone into doing something, you're able to present your idea with much fewer words. And so that takes the wordiness out of the sentence and expresses the idea in a very streamlined way. Our next verb is assuage, which means to lessen or satisfy. Personally, I find this verb very difficult to pronounce, and it does not at all look the way that it is pronounced. It looks like it should be pronounced asuaji or something, I'm not really sure, but the actual way that it is pronounced is assuage. Taking practice tests will help lessen your anxiety about taking the TOEFL. Taking practice tests will help assuage your anxiety about taking the TOEFL. Our next verb is reprove. Now, if you encountered this word on the TOEFL test and you didn't know what it meant, you might try to break it up into and prove and assume that it means something like to prove again, but it doesn't. It actually means to punish. And because the verb is a little confusing in that way, I definitely wanted to include it in this class. The professor punished the students who cheated by giving them a failing grade. The professor reproved the cheaters by giving them a failing grade. Finally, let's review our verbs for this lesson. Formulate, do something systematically. Dupe, trick or deceive. Goad, annoy someone into doing something. Assuage, lessen or satisfy. And reprove, punish. I hope you found Lesson 4 helpful, and we'll see you next time. Welcome back for Lesson 5 of Advanced TOEFL Verbs. Here we go. Our verbs for this lesson are debunk, lionize, rouse, prevaricate, and the confusing words elude and allude. Our first verb for this lesson is debunk, which means to show to be false. The speaker's arguments are easily proven wrong. The speaker's arguments are easily debunked. Our next verb is lionize. Hold something in high regard or treat somebody like they're a celebrity. The expert is held in high regard in the field of astrophysics. The expert is lionized in the field of astrophysics. The next verb is rouse, bring about or wake up. His sneaky behavior brought about suspicion. His sneaky behavior roused suspicion. The next verb is a very advanced verb, prevaricate. It means to try to avoid the truth, to try to dodge telling the truth or revealing what the truth is. So continuing with the sneaky guy that we met when we were studying the previous verb rouse, here he is again. He was sneaky in his responses to the police. He prevaricated in his responses to the police. Now let's look at the confusing words elude and allude. Elude means to escape or evade. Allude means to make reference to something. These are very useful words, especially at the collegiate level, and they're important to study because sometimes people will pronounce allude as elude. So you really need to pay attention to the context. Despite understanding all of the words, the message of the paragraph eludes me. The message of the paragraph escapes me. So here we would use the word elude. This paragraph alludes to previous research on this topic. It refers to previous research on this topic, and therefore we would use allude. Finally, let's do a quick review of our verbs for this lesson. Debunk, show to be false. Lionize, hold in high regard or treat someone as a celebrity. Rouse, bring about or wake up. Prevaricate, try to avoid the truth. And elude and allude. Elude means to escape or evade something, and allude means to make reference to something. I hope you found Lesson 5 helpful. We'll see you soon. Welcome back for Lesson 6 of Advanced TOEFL Verbs. Let's get things going. In this lesson, we'll look at the verbs adhere, gratify, rendezvous, galvanize, and the verb assent, as well as the noun assent. Our first verb is adhere, which means to follow the rules of something. All students should follow school policy. All students should adhere to school policy. Gratify, please or satisfy. I was pleased when I made the dean's list this semester. I was gratified when I made the dean's list this semester. There's nothing wrong with pleased. Pleased is a perfectly good word, but it's a little bland. And gratified better expresses a depth and a maturity of emotion that we're looking for in this sentence. The next verb is rendezvous, meet up at a certain time and place. English speakers love to borrow words from other languages, and this word is borrowed from French. We can meet up at the Student Union at 3 p.m. We can rendezvous at the Student Union at 3 p.m. Rendezvous can also be used as a noun to refer to the place itself. We can meet up at the rendezvous. We can meet up at the meeting place. Next, we have galvanize, strengthen someone to take action. So this verb has two parts to it, inspiring someone and then the action that they take. The coach's speech inspired the team to fight hard. So here in this example, we see the two parts separated. The coach's speech galvanized the team. And now we have our confusing words of the day, the verb assent and the noun assent, which are spelled differently. As a verb, assent means to show agreement, usually after some persuasion. As a noun, assent means to go up, usually a mountain or a pyramid or something very high. He assented to the dog's demands for an extra treat. His ascent to the top of the pyramid was difficult, but the view made the journey worthwhile. And now let's review our verbs for this lesson. Adhere, follow the rules of something. Gratify, please or satisfy. Rendezvous, meet up at a certain time and place. Galvanize, strengthen someone to take action. And assent, the verb, which means to show agreement, and assent, the noun, which means to go up. I hope you found Lesson 6 useful. Until the next time. Thank you again for joining me for Lesson 7 of Advanced TOEFL Verbs. Here we go. The verbs we will review in this lesson are demystify, commence, refute, obviate, and two shades of meaning words, impel and compel. Our first verb for this lesson is demystify, make more clear. Literally to take away, mystify, the mystery of something. And of course, by taking away the mystery, it becomes more clear. I liked how the writer made clear a complicated topic. I liked how the writer demystified a complicated topic. By using the advanced vocabulary word, we take something that was a little bit more plain and common, made clear, and we add a more interesting, more energetic word to the sentence, demystified. Commence, begin. Welcome to our annual Christmas party. Let the festivities begin. Welcome to our annual Christmas party. Let the festivities commence. The next word is refute, which means to reject or show something to be false. Although I personally disagree, I cannot reject the idea that the writer presents her points with good evidence. And here we have the same sentence, but we can substitute in our advanced vocabulary word to streamline the sentence a bit. Although I personally disagree, I cannot refute that the writer presents her points with good evidence. Our next verb is obviate. Now, if you're not familiar with this verb and you come across it in the TOEFL test, you may try to guess that it has something to do with a word that you probably know, obvious. But it doesn't mean to make something obvious. It means to take away an obstacle. Let's look at an example. Doing an internship makes taking a capstone course unnecessary for completing your degree program. Doing an internship obviates the capstone requirement. And now let's look at our shades of meaning words for this lesson, impel and compel. Now, native speakers tend to use these pretty interchangeably, but there is a slight technical difference. Impel has more of a sense to motivate someone to do something, whereas compel has more of a sense to force someone to do something. He felt impelled to take action. He felt motivated to take action. Nobody could compel him to do the right thing. Nobody could force him to do the right thing. And now let's do a quick review of our verbs for this lesson. Demystify, make more clear. Commence, begin. Refute, reject or show to be false. Obviate, make an obstacle unnecessary. And impel and compel, with impel having more of a meaning to motivate someone to do something, and compel having more of a sense to force someone to do something. I hope you found Lesson 7 helpful. We'll see you next time. Thank you again for joining me for Lesson 7 of Advanced TOEFL Verbs. Here we go. The verbs we will review in this lesson are demystify, commence, refute, obviate, and two shades of meaning words, impel and compel. Our first verb for this lesson is demystify, make more clear. Literally to take away, mystify, the mystery of something. And of course, by taking away the mystery, it becomes more clear. I liked how the writer made clear a complicated topic. I liked how the writer demystified a complicated topic. By using the advanced vocabulary word, we take something that was a little bit more plain and common, made clear, and we add a more interesting, more energetic word to the sentence, demystified. Commence, begin. Welcome to our annual Christmas party. Let the festivities begin. Welcome to our annual Christmas party. Let the festivities commence. The next word is refute, which means to reject or show something to be false. Although I personally disagree, I cannot reject the idea that the writer presents her points with good evidence. And here we have the same sentence, but we can substitute in our advanced vocabulary word to streamline the sentence a bit. Although I personally disagree, I cannot refute that the writer presents her points with good evidence. Our next verb is obviate. Now, if you're not familiar with this verb and you come across it in the TOEFL test, you may try to guess that it has something to do with a word that you probably know, obvious. But it doesn't mean to make something obvious. It means to take away an obstacle. Let's look at an example. Doing an internship makes taking a capstone course unnecessary for completing your degree program. Doing an internship obviates the capstone requirement. And now let's look at our shades of meaning words for this lesson, impel and compel. Now, native speakers tend to use these pretty interchangeably, but there is a slight technical difference. Impel has more of a sense to motivate someone to do something, whereas compel has more of a sense to force someone to do something. He felt impelled to take action. He felt motivated to take action. Nobody could compel him to do the right thing. Nobody could force him to do the right thing. And now let's do a quick review of our verbs for this lesson. Demystify, make more clear. Commence, begin. Refute, reject or show to be false. Obviate, make an obstacle unnecessary. And impel and compel, with impel having more of a meaning to motivate someone to do something, and compel having more of a sense to force someone to do something. I hope you found Lesson 7 helpful. We'll see you next time. Thank you again for joining me for Lesson 9 of Advanced TOEFL Verbs. Here we go. Our verbs for this lesson are cultivate, distinguish, transpire, espouse, and two shades of meaning words, impede and inhibit. For our first verb in this lesson, we'll look at cultivate, which means to grow something. Now this can be used literally, like for farming or agriculture, such as to cultivate wheat or rice or corn, or we can use it more figuratively, like we're going to do in this lesson. Let's take a look at an example. The goal is to create an atmosphere of innovation, dedication, and mutual respect. Nothing wrong with the word create, a very useful word, but also a very common one. So let's look how we can make the sentence more interesting by using an advanced vocabulary word. The goal is to cultivate an atmosphere of innovation, dedication, and mutual respect. Using the word cultivate makes the sentence more energetic. The next verb is distinguish. Note a difference. The speaker fails to note the differences between each point. The speaker fails to distinguish between each point. Using distinguish takes away the wordiness of the previous sentence and makes the sentence more streamlined. Our next verb is transpire, which means to happen or to occur. No one is sure what will happen. No one is certain what will transpire. Using transpire makes the sentence a little bit more dramatic. Next, we have espouse, express, make a claim. Simply expressing your points isn't enough. You need supporting evidence. Simply espousing your points isn't enough. You need supporting evidence. Again, the advanced verb here adds a little more drama to the sentence. And now let's look at our shades of meaning words for this lesson, impede and inhibit. These are really synonyms, but there is a slight shade of meaning between the two of them, where impede means more to make something more difficult, and inhibit has more of a sense of preventing something or slowing it down. Lack of motivation impeded his ability to achieve his goals. Lack of motivation inhibited his ability to achieve his goals. So as we can see, these two words really are synonyms. But in this sentence, we get more of a sense that his ability to achieve his goals was slowed down instead of in the previous sentence where we have that sense of things being more difficult. And finally, let's review our verbs for this lesson. Cultivate, to grow. Distinguish, to note a difference. Transpire, to happen or to occur. Espouse, to express, to make a claim. And impede and inhibit. Impede, to make something more difficult, and inhibit, to slow something down. I hope you found Lesson 9 helpful. We'll see you soon. Welcome back for Lesson 10 of Advanced TOEFL Verbs. Let's get started. In this lesson, we'll take a look at the verbs misconstrue, reiterate, conflate, align, and the confusing words surmise and summarize. Our first verb for this lesson is misconstrue, to misunderstand or get something wrong. The reviewer misunderstood the author's message. Misunderstood, perfectly fine word, but more of a mid-level intermediate vocabulary word, and we have an opportunity here to use an advanced vocabulary word. The reviewer misconstrued the author's message. The next verb is reiterate, to say again. Effective speakers restate their main message during the conclusion of their presentations. Again, restate, perfectly good intermediate vocabulary word, but let's look at the same example with the advanced vocabulary word. Effective speakers reiterate their main message during the conclusion of their presentations. Using reiterate gives it a more advanced academic feel. Conflate uses at least two different things, confusing them. We can avoid confusing different issues by discussing each one individually in our paper. We can avoid conflating different issues by discussing each one individually in our paper. The next verb for this lesson is align. Make things orderly or be in agreement with. This is a verb that you'll probably see a lot and is very useful. So let's take a look at an example. The writer's opinions don't agree with the opinions of the experts. And here we can make the sentence a little bit more academic by using the word align. The writer's opinions don't align with the opinions of the experts. And now we'll look at our confusing words for this lesson, surmise and summarize. These are words that even native speakers confuse. Surmise means to make a good guess, and summarize means to sum up the main points of something. Although the speaker did not state this directly, we can surmise from the tone of the paper that the speaker is fully in favor of eating more ice cream. In this example, the speaker does not tell us exactly what the speaker's point is, but the tone of the paper gives us the idea where we can make an educated guess, we can surmise that the speaker is fully in favor of eating more ice cream. I will summarize my presentation by stating this. Ice cream is delicious, relatively inexpensive, and a fun thing to eat on a hot day. So in this example, I'm taking all of my evidence, delicious, inexpensive, fun, and summarizing this in a short statement. Finally, let's review our verbs for this lesson. Misconstrue, to misunderstand or to get it wrong. Reiterate, to restate or to say something again. Conflate, to use at least two different things, to confuse them. Align, to make things orderly, to be in agreement. And surmise, which means to make a good guess. And summarize, to sum up the main points. I hope you found Lesson 10 useful. Until the next time. Thank you again for joining me for Lesson 11 of Advanced TOEFL Verbs. Here we go. Our verbs for this lesson are confer, fathom, scrutinize, portend, and we'll look at the confusing words comprise and compromise. Our first verb for this lesson is confer, to give or to offer. Traveling to new places offers many benefits. Traveling to new places confers many benefits. The next verb is fathom, to understand. I cannot understand why she chose to do that. I cannot fathom why she chose to do that. Using the word fathom makes the sentence more dramatic. Our next verb is scrutinize, to examine or inspect closely. We need to examine each point closely before formulating our response. We need to scrutinize each point before formulating our response. Using scrutinize makes the sentence more precise and streamlined. The next verb is portend, be a sign or a warning of something. This is usually something negative. The dark clouds in the sky signaled rain. The dark clouds in the sky portended rain. Using portend adds a little drama to the sentence. And now we'll look at comprise and compromise. Comprise means to make up something, where compromise is an agreement. Let's look at some examples. The final exam comprises 50% of your grade. 50% of your grade is made up by the final exam. Nobody got everything that they wanted, but we compromised in order to reach an agreement. Here, everybody gave up a little something that they wanted in order to reach an agreement. They compromised. And finally, let's do a quick review of our verbs for this lesson. Confer, to give or to offer. Fathom, to understand. Scrutinize, to examine or inspect closely. Portend, be a sign or warning. And comprise and compromise. Comprise, meaning to make up something, and compromise, an agreement. I hope you found lesson 11 useful. We'll see you the next time. As always, welcome back for lesson 12 of Advanced TOEFL Verbs. Let's get things started. The verbs for this lesson are imbue, concoct, rectify, prognosticate, and we'll look at the confusing words elicit, which is a verb, and illicit, an adjective. Our first verb for this lesson is imbue, fill with something. Her speech filled the team with a sense of hope and purpose. Filled is a perfectly good word, and as always, if that's the word that you can think about when you're taking the TOEFL test, just use it and move on. But we have an opportunity here to use a more advanced vocabulary word. Her speech imbued the team with a sense of hope and purpose. Using imbued gives the sentence a stronger sense of emotion and more depth. Concoct, come up with. This usually refers to something negative. They came up with a plan to rob the bank. They concocted a plan to rob the bank. In the previous example, came up with, perfectly fine, but a little plain. And by using concocted in this sentence, we express the sentiment that these people are just awful and horrible and planning to do something completely terrible. robbing the bank. The next verb is rectify, to fix. She was able to fix her bad grade by retaking the exam. She was able to rectify her bad grade by retaking her exam. By using the word rectify, we give a stronger sense that she was able to make it good again. The next verb is prognosticate, to predict the future. Trying to predict the future far in advance can be interesting, but seldom practical. Attempts to prognosticate far in advance can be interesting, but are seldom practical. Now let's look at our confusing words of the day, elicit and illicit. Elicit is a verb meaning to bring something about, whereas illicit is an adjective meaning illegal. The student's presentation did not bring about a positive response from the professor. And here we can use our advanced verb, elicit. The student's presentation did not elicit a positive response from the professor. Stealing is illicit. Stealing is illegal. And now let's do a quick review of our verbs for this lesson. Imbue, fill with something. Concoct, come up with, usually something negative, like robbing a bank. Rectify, to fix. Prognosticate, to predict the future. And elicit, to bring about, which is a verb. And illicit, which means something is illegal. It's an adjective. I hope you found Lesson 12 helpful, and I'll see you soon. Welcome back for Lesson 13 of Advanced TOEFL Verbs. Let's get started. In this lesson, we'll look at the verbs vie, ascribe, discern, engender, and the confusing words meddle, the verb, meddle, the noun, both of which sound like metal. The first verb for this lesson is vie, which means to compete vigorously or to compete intensely. All of the top students are competing intensely for an internship. All of the top students are vying for an internship. Now you'll notice that in the gerund form, which is the most common form that you will see this verb, there's that spelling change to the Y, V-Y-I-N-G, vying. Our next verb is ascribe, to assign as the cause of something. The author states that global warming is the underlying cause. The author ascribes the problem to global warming. By using ascribes, we can create a more streamlined sentence. The next verb is discern, to figure out. I was unable to figure out the presenter's takeaway message. I was unable to discern the presenter's takeaway message. Discern makes the sentence more academic. Engender, to instill or to cause. The writer doesn't cause a feeling of confidence in her expertise in this subject matter. The writer doesn't engender confidence in her expertise in this subject matter. Using engender in this sentence allows not only a more streamlined, but a more specific sentence. Now we get to our confusing words for this lesson, meddle and meddle. Meddle as a verb means to interfere. Meddle as a noun means the ability to handle difficulties. And both of these words sound like metal, M-E-T-A-L. So if you hear something that sounds like metal, M-E-T-A-L, but it doesn't make any sense, then it's probably one of these words. It is best to avoid meddling in your colleagues' personal lives. Don't interfere in your colleagues' personal lives. The challenging project tested the team's mettle. The challenging project tested the team's toughness in completing the project. Finally, let's do a quick review of our verbs for this lesson. Vie, to compete vigorously. Ascribe, to assign as the cause of something. Discern, to figure something out. Engender, to instill, to cause. And to meddle, meaning to interfere. And the noun meddle, meaning the ability to handle difficulties. I hope you found Lesson 13 useful. Until the next time. Thank you again for joining me for Lesson 14 of Advanced TOEFL Verbs. Our verbs for this lesson are annotate, extrapolate, polarize, circumvent, and the confusing words depreciate and deprecate. The first verb for this lesson is annotate, to add notes. We added notes to the paper. We annotated the paper. As you might imagine, annotate is a very common word used in advanced academia, so in college and graduate school. And you'll probably at some point be asked to read an annotated text, which just means that you're reading a text that has a bunch of notes added to it. Our next verb is extrapolate. Use information to reach a general conclusion. From the data, we can get many useful conclusions. From the data, we can extrapolate many useful conclusions. Extrapolate makes the sentence more academic. Polarize. Put things on opposite sides. Differences of opinion caused the two parties to take opposite sides, and no agreement was made. Differences of opinion polarized the two parties, and no agreement was made. Using polarized greatly streamlines the sentence. The next verb is circumvent, to go around or avoid. I was able to get around the research paper project by writing a paper on my summer internship. I was able to circumvent the research paper requirement by writing a paper on my summer internship. And here we have our confusing words for this lesson, depreciate and deprecate. Depreciate means to lower over time, where deprecate means to shame. The value of apartments in this area has been depreciating. The value of apartments has been lowering over time. You should address the writer's arguments and not deprecate the speaker personally. You should address the arguments and not make personal attacks against the speaker. Finally, we'll do a quick review of our verbs for this lesson. Annotate, to add notes. Extrapolate, to use information to reach a general conclusion. Polarize, to put things on opposite sides. Circumvent, to go around, avoid. And appreciate, which means to lower over time, and deprecate, which means to shame or attack personally. I hope you found this lesson helpful. We'll see you the next time. As always, welcome back for Lesson 15 of Advanced TOEFL Verbs. Let's get started. The verbs for this lesson are implicate, avert, wane, grapple, and our shades of meaning words veer and careen. For this lesson, our first verb is implicate, to convey through indirect means. She indirectly stated that her teammate was cheating. She implicated that her teammate was cheating. Using implicated is not only more streamlined, it's also more specific. The next verb is avert, to avoid. Good planning will help us avoid negative outcomes. Good planning will help us avert negative outcomes. In the previous example, avoid is a fine word. Avert is the opportunity for us to use a more advanced vocabulary choice. The next verb is wane, to become smaller. My interest in my current job is getting smaller. My interest in my current job is waning. Not only is this more streamlined, it expresses more of the emotion of the speaker. Our next verb is grapple, to struggle with something. I am struggling with my class project. I am grappling with my class project. It adds a little more drama to the sentence. And now let's look at our shades of meaning words for this lesson. Veer, which means to go to the side, and careen, which also means to go to the side, but to go to the side in a way that is completely out of control. The car veered into the right lane of the highway. It went to the side, it went to the right, but in a controlled manner. The car careened off the road. It was out of control. It went completely off the road. And now we'll do a final review of our verbs for this lesson. Implicate, to convey through indirect means. Avert, to avoid. Wane, to become smaller. Grapple, to struggle with something. And veer, to go to the side, and careen, to go to the side out of control. I hope you found Lesson 15 helpful, and I'll see you the next time. Welcome back for Lesson 16 of Advanced TOEFL Verbs. Let's get started. In this lesson, we'll look at the verbs gravitate, substantiate, disseminate, concede, and our things are changing with the times words, events and evidence. Our first verb for this lesson is gravitate, to move towards something. I have always been attracted to business and economics. I have always gravitated towards business and economics. Using gravitated is a little bit more streamlined. The next verb is substantiate, to provide supporting evidence for something. The author did not provide any supporting evidence for his claims. And here we can use our advanced verb to eliminate a lot of wordiness. The author did not substantiate his claims. Next, we have disseminate, to hand out, to make known. We will hand out the information about our cultural event to the student body. We will disseminate the information about our cultural event to the student body. Our fourth verb for this lesson is concede, to admit something is true, to acknowledge. She refused to acknowledge that her bad attitude was causing problems with her job. She refused to concede that her bad attitude was causing problems with her job. And now we get to our things are changing words. Events, which means to show evidence, and then there's also evidence as a noun, but evidence is now commonly used as a verb. As evinced by the arguments presented in this paper, ice cream is delicious. Now that's more of an older academic way of saying things using evinced, but if you're in an academic program and you use as evidenced by the arguments presented in this paper, then a professor might comment negatively on that. So in the academic world, you still want to use the traditional form events. And then here we have evidence as a noun. The evidence proves that ice cream is delicious. As evidenced by the results of our new marketing study, customers think our ice cream is delicious. And this is more modern, or what you would find in the business world or just in everyday conversation. People using evidence as a verb. Finally, let's do a quick review of our verbs for this lesson. Gravitate, to move towards something. Substantiate, provide supporting evidence for something. Disseminate, to hand out, to make known. Concede, to admit something is true, to acknowledge. And events and evidence. I hope you found Lesson 16 useful. Until the next time. Thank you again for joining me for Lesson 17 of Advanced TOEFL Verbs. Here we go. Our verbs for this lesson are warrant, exemplify, envision, concur, and the confusing words, the verb impart and the adjective impartial. The first verb for this lesson is warrant, to be justified, to cause something that is reasonable. The severity of the student's actions makes a swift response from administration justified. And we can use our advanced verb to streamline the sentence. The severity of the student's actions warrants a swift response from administration. Exemplify, be a typical example of something. The author's arguments show someone with strong critical thinking skills. Our previous example was a little vague, and so now we can use our advanced verb to create a more specific sentence. The author's arguments exemplify strong critical thinking. Our next verb is envision, to visualize or imagine. We imagine a strong future for our company. We envision a strong future for our company. Using envision makes the sentence more powerful. Our next verb is concur, to agree. While the writer presents good evidence, I cannot agree. Although there was nothing wrong with the previous example, we have an opportunity here to elevate the level of the sentence and make it more academic with our advanced verb. While the writer presents good evidence, I cannot concur. And now we get to our confusing words for the day. The verb impart, which means to give, but in its adjective form, impartial, it has a completely different meaning of not taking sides. The speaker's tone gives a sense of passion about the subject matter. Even so, the speaker does not take sides. And here we can use our vocabulary to create a more elegant and streamlined commentary. The speaker's tone imparts a sense of passion about the subject matter. Even so, the speaker remains impartial. Let's do a final review of our verbs for this lesson. Warrant, to justify, to cause something that is reasonable. Exemplify, to be a typical example of something. Envision, to visualize or to imagine something. Concur, to agree. And impart, the verb meaning to give, and the adjective impartial meaning not taking sides. I hope you found Lesson 17 useful. See you next time. As always, welcome back for Advanced TOEFL Verbs Lesson 18. Let's get started. The verbs for this lesson are cull, evoke, corroborate, emulate, and our shades of meaning words for this lesson, materialize and manifest. For this lesson, our first verb is cull, taken from different resources. The report was taken from raw data and interviews with experts. Now in this example, taken, perfectly good word, but a very basic vocabulary word. So let's look at another example where we can take the opportunity to use our advanced verb. This report was culled from raw data and interviews with experts. That makes the sentence more sophisticated. Evoke, bring into awareness. The imagery in the story causes a sense of nostalgia in the reader. The imagery in the story evokes nostalgia in the reader. Evokes makes the sentence more streamlined and also more specific. And now we have a very difficult to pronounce word, corroborate. The new evidence confirms previous studies on this topic. The new evidence corroborates previous studies on this topic. The next verb is emulate, try to be like or to imitate someone superior. He always tries to imitate his favorite professor. Now imitate works fine here, but it's a little imprecise. Let's look at the next example. He always tries to emulate his favorite professor. And now we get to our shades of meaning words for this lesson, materialize and manifest. Materialize has more of a sense of becoming real, while manifest has more of a sense of to demonstrate. Let's take a look. After months of hard work, an opportunity for promotion finally materialized. The opportunity for promotion finally became real. She manifested her strong work ethic by staying late and taking extra assignments. She demonstrated her strong work ethic by doing those things. Finally, let's do a quick review of our verbs for this lesson. Cull, taken from different resources. Evoke, to bring into awareness. Corroborate, to confirm. To emulate, to try to be like, to imitate someone superior. And materialize, to become real, and manifest, to demonstrate. I hope you found Lesson 18 useful, and I'll see you next time. Welcome back for Lesson 19 of Advanced TOEFL Verbs. Let's get things started. In this lesson, we'll look at the verbs exacerbate, mitigate, conceptualize, belabor, and the confusing words apprise and appraise. The first verb for this lesson is exacerbate, cause to become bigger. Making excuses will only make the problem worse. Making excuses will only exacerbate the problem. The next verb is mitigate, to make less bad. Making excuses will not lessen the problem. Making excuses will not mitigate the problem. Now, in our previous example, less, lessen, those are fine words, but very basic vocabulary words. And so that gives us the opportunity to introduce the advanced word, mitigate. The next verb is conceptualize, to formulate an idea. Formulate your ideas before writing your essay. Conceptualize your ideas before writing your essay. Good advice just in general, but especially when you're writing your TOEFL essays. Our next verb is belabor, go on and on and on. The writer keeps making the same point over and over again. The writer belabors the point. And here we have our confusing words for this lesson, apprise and appraise. Apprise means to inform, where appraise means to assess a value or set a price. We will figure out what's going on with the situation and inform our supervisor as the situation develops. We will appraise the situation and apprise our supervisor as the situation develops. Now let's do a final quick review of our verbs for this lesson. Exacerbate, cause to become bigger. Mitigate, to make less bad. Conceptualize, to formulate an idea. Belabor, to go on. And apprise, to inform. And appraise, to assess value or set a price. I hope you found this lesson helpful. We'll see you the next time. Here we are, Lesson 20, the final lesson of Advanced TOEFL Verbs. Let's get things started. Our verbs for this lesson are hone, aspire, contradict, foster, and our confusing word for this lesson, regard, not because the verb regard is confusing, but because you'll see it in so many forms that even native speakers get it wrong, and we'll take a closer look at that at the end of the lesson. The first verb for this lesson is hone, which means to sharpen or to perfect over time. Taking practice tests will sharpen your performance on the actual TOEFL. And while in the previous example, sharpen is a perfectly good word, very nice intermediate word, we have an opportunity to use the advanced vocabulary word here. Taking practice tests will hone your ability to excel on the TOEFL. Our next verb is aspire, to have a goal. My goal is to excel in my courses. I aspire to excel in my courses. The next verb is contradict, to disagree. Contra, against, dict, to say. Literally to say against. The new studies disagree with previous studies. The new studies contradict previous studies. Using contradict makes the sentence more academic. Foster, encourage or promote. My professor encourages an environment where students communicate and collaborate. My professor fosters an environment of communication and collaboration. In the previous example, encourages, great word, but a little bit more general. And here, fosters gives us a more specific idea of what the professor is doing. The last verb that we'll look at in this lesson is regard, which means to view or to look at. I view her as a good professor. I regard her as a good professor. As I mentioned at the beginning of the lesson, regard takes many forms in the English language, and they're all really useful, but it's important to know how to use them correctly. So here we have an example of regard being used in a form at the beginning of a sentence, meaning to reference something. Regarding my professor, I think she's good. In reference to my professor, I think she's good. And here's the same thing in a slightly different format. In regard to my professor, in reference to my professor, I think she's good. Now, all of the time, you will see and hear in regards with an S to my professor. No, that's wrong. It should be in regard to my professor. Now, here we have another form, regardless, which means despite something or in spite of something. So our example is, regardless of her faults, I think my professor is a good teacher overall. Now, very frequently, you will hear native speakers say, irregardless. Technically, that's not a word, but you will hear it a lot. But the proper form that you need to use is regardless, not irregardless. Don't use it. Not a recognized word. Use the recognized word regardless. And here we have regard as a valediction, a way of saying goodbye. Kind regards, Matthew. This is where you should use the S, regards, when you're saying goodbye. And finally, let's review our verbs for this lesson. Hone, sharpen, or to perfect over time. Aspire, to have a goal. Contradict, to disagree. Foster, to encourage or promote. And to regard, which means to view And also its other forms: regarding, in regard, regardless, and finally, the valediction regards. Thank you so much for allowing me to be part of your journey. I had a wonderful time putting this class together, and I wish you all the best, not only on your exam, but in all of your future endeavors. Until the next time, take care.